My controlling father put a tracker on my car. But I found 7. I'm 17 years old, and I just found out my father has been tracking my every move for God knows how long. It all started this morning when I was running late for first period AP chemistry. I grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter at 7:47 a.m. Yes, I remember the exact time because I was staring at the microwave clock, calculating whether I could make it to Riverside High before the tardy bell. Dad was already gone for his 6 a.m. shift at the fire station, which meant no awkward small talk about where I was going or when I'd be back. I rushed out to my 2019 Honda Civic, a graduation gift from last year that came with approximately 17 lectures about responsibility and earning trust. The morning was typical October cold in Michigan, and I was fumbling with my phone trying to text my boyfriend Jake that I'd be late to meet him before class. That's when I saw it. A tiny black wire poking out from under my dashboard, barely visible unless you were sitting in exactly the right position with the morning sun hitting the windshield at just the right angle. At first, I thought it might be part of the car's normal wiring. I'm not exactly a mechanic. But something about it looked wrong. Too neat. Too deliberately hidden. My stomach dropped to somewhere around my shoes. I'd heard about this stuff happening to other kids. Sarah Morrison's mom put some kind of tracking app on her phone after she got caught at a party last spring. But a physical device? In my car? That felt different. That felt like something you'd see in a crime documentary. I sat there in our driveway for a full 5 minutes, engine running, staring at that stupid little wire. Part of me wanted to pretend I'd never seen it. Just drive to school, ace my chemistry test, meet Jake for lunch, and live in blissful ignorance for one more day. But I couldn't. I turned off the engine and really started looking. And that's when I found the second one. This device was bigger, about the size of a deck of cards, magnetic mounted under my rear bumper. I only found it because I dropped my keys and had to crawl around on the asphalt to retrieve them. There it was, stuck to the metal like some kind of technological parasite. 2 trackers. My father had put 2 separate GPS trackers on my car. I called in sick to school, first time I'd ever done that without actually being sick. Then I drove straight to Jake's house, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. Jake's been my boyfriend for 8 months now, and he's the only person who truly gets what it's like living with my father's intensity. See, ever since Mom died in that car accident 3 years ago, Dad has been what my school counselor politely calls hypervigilant. What I call suffocating. He needs to know where I am every second of every day. He calls my teachers. He drives by places where he thinks I might be. He's memorized the schedules of all my friends. But this? This was next level. When I pulled into Jake's driveway at 8:23 a.m., he took one look at my face and knew something was seriously wrong. We need to search my entire car, I told him. Right now. I had no idea we were about to discover just how deep my father's obsession actually went. Jake didn't ask questions. That's one of the things I love about him. When I'm falling apart, he just acts. Within 30 seconds, he'd grabbed a flashlight from his dad's garage and was already crouched next to my car, examining the device under my bumper. Holy shit, he whispered, running his fingers along the edges. This isn't some cheap Amazon tracker. This is professional grade stuff. Jake would know. His older brother Marcus works in IT security, and Jake's been obsessed with technology since middle school. He builds computers for fun and has this weird ability to identify any electronic device just by looking at it. Professional grade? My voice came out as a squeak. What does that mean? It means your dad spent serious money on this. We're talking like $300 to $400 per device, minimum. Jake stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. Emma, these are the kind of trackers that private investigators use. Or. He trailed off. Or what? Or really paranoid parents with too much disposable income. We spent the next hour systematically searching every inch of my Honda. Jake had me pop the hood, open the trunk, remove the floor mats, even check inside the spare tire compartment. I felt sick to my stomach watching him work, dreading what we might find but knowing we had to look. The third tracker was hidden inside the center console, wedged behind the USB charging port. Jake had to use a screwdriver to get it out. The fourth was velcroed to the inside of my glove compartment, tucked behind my registration papers. The fifth was the size of a quarter, stuck to the underside of my driver's seat. By the time we found the sixth one, a tiny magnetic dot clinging to my side mirror housing, I was sitting on Jake's front steps with my head between my knees, trying not to hyperventilate. There's got to be more, Jake said grimly, crouched next to my front wheel well. Nobody puts 6 trackers on a car unless they're completely obsessed with redundancy. If 5 fail, number 6 is backup. But what if 6 fail? That's when we found number 7. This one was different from the others. Smaller, more sophisticated, and hardwired directly into my car's electrical system behind the radio. Jake had to partially dismantle my dashboard to reach it. Emma, he said quietly, holding the device in his palm. This one isn't just tracking your location. What do you mean? It's recording audio. There's a microphone. He pointed to a tiny hole no bigger than a pinprick. Your dad hasn't just been tracking where you go. He's been listening to everything you say in this car. The world tilted sideways. Every conversation I'd had with Jake during our drives. Every phone call I'd made while stuck in traffic. Every time I vented about Dad to my friends, thinking I was alone and safe in my own car. He'd heard all of it. I thought about last Tuesday, when I called my best friend Zoe and spent 20 minutes complaining about Dad's new rule that I had to text him every hour when I wasn't home. I'd said things, harsh things about how suffocating he was, how I couldn't wait to leave for college and never come back. He'd been listening. We have to put them back, I said suddenly. Jake stared at me like I'd lost my mind. What? Emma, no. This is insane. This is borderline illegal. If he realizes I found them, things will get worse. Trust me. I stood up, my legs still shaky. But now that I know they're there, a plan was already forming in my mind. A terrible, brilliant, absolutely necessary plan. I want to mess with him, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. If Dad wants to track my every move and listen to my conversations, then let's give him something really interesting to track and hear. Jake was carefully placing the 7th tracker back behind my radio, but he paused. Emma, I don't think that's a good idea. Your dad is clearly already paranoid enough to spend thousands of dollars on surveillance equipment. If you start acting suspicious, he's already suspicious of everything I do. The words burst out of me louder than I intended. Jake, I haven't been to a single party this year. I've never missed curfew. My grades are perfect. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I barely even speed. And he still felt the need to install 7 tracking devices in my car. I started pacing around Jake's driveway, my mind racing. Last month, he called Pizza Palace to confirm I was actually there when I said I was grabbing dinner with Zoe. The month before that, he drove past the movie theater to make sure my car was in the parking lot during the exact showing I told him I was attending. Jake finished securing the audio device and started reassembling my dashboard. Okay, but what exactly are you thinking? Because knowing you, this isn't going to be some small prank. He was right. The plan crystallizing in my head was definitely not small. What if I started going places that would make him worry, but not quite enough to confront me directly? Like, places that are technically innocent but would drive him crazy with questions he can't ask without revealing he's been spying on me. I pulled out my phone and opened Google Maps, scrolling through nearby locations. Look, there's a Planned Parenthood clinic on Maple Street, about 15 minutes from school. What if I drove there tomorrow, sat in the parking lot for exactly 37 minutes, then left? Jake's eyes widened. Emma, that's genius? I know. I was getting excited now, the helpless feeling from earlier transforming into something that felt almost like power. Or I could drive to that sketchy tattoo parlor on the east side. You know, the one next to the bail bonds place? Just sit outside for a while, maybe have a loud phone conversation about finally doing something I've wanted to do for months. Your dad's going to lose his mind, Jake said, but I could tell he was starting to see the appeal. What about that support group that meets at the community center on Thursday nights? The one with the really vague name, New Beginnings or something? Perfect. I was fully energized now. I could park there, go inside just long enough to figure out what they actually do, then leave. Let him spend the week wondering what kind of new beginning his perfect daughter is looking for. Jake secured the last piece of my dashboard and stood up. Okay, but we need rules. Nothing that could actually get you in trouble if he decides to follow up. And nothing that might make him panic enough to call the police or show up somewhere in person. Agreed. This is about psychological warfare, not actual danger. I was already making mental notes. I should probably start small. Maybe tomorrow I'll just take a really weird route to school, drive around the seedier part of town for no apparent reason. Let him wonder why his honor student daughter is suddenly interested in the neighborhood with 3 pawn shops and a strip club. The honey pot? Jake grinned. Your dad would have an aneurysm. Exactly. I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time since Mom died, I wasn't just reacting to Dad's control, I was taking action. Jake, this is going to work. Instead of feeling trapped by those trackers, I'm going to use them. But as we finished putting my car back together, I had no idea how quickly things were about to spiral completely out of control. The next morning, I put my plan into action. At 7:15 a.m., instead of taking my usual route down Riverside Drive to school, I made a deliberate detour through what everyone calls the rough part of town, a 6-block stretch of Cedar Avenue lined with check cashing places, discount liquor stores, and apartments with bars on the windows. I drove slowly, deliberately, making sure to hit every red light. At 7:23, I pulled into the parking lot of Sal's Pawn and Gold, sat there for exactly 4 minutes scrolling through my phone, then drove to the Honey Pot strip club next door and idled in their parking lot for another 3 minutes. The whole time, I kept imagining Dad at the fire station, obsessively refreshing whatever tracking app he was using, watching that little dot representing his perfect daughter lingering in places that would make his blood pressure skyrocket. The thought made me smile for the first time in weeks. By the time I actually got to school at 7:47, I was practically giddy with the secret power I now held. I sailed through AP Chemistry, aced a pop quiz in European history, and spent lunch telling Jake about the look of pure confusion on some construction worker's face when he saw a teenage girl in a Honda Civic just sitting outside a strip club at 7:30 in the morning. Phase 1 complete, I announced as we walked to his car after school. Tomorrow I'm thinking that Planned Parenthood visit. Really let his imagination run wild. That's when Jake's expression suddenly changed. Emma, don't look now, but I think we have a problem. What kind of problem? Your dad's truck. Silver Ford F-150, license plate starts with BCF? It's parked across the street from the main entrance. My stomach dropped. I turned slowly, and there it was, Dad's truck, positioned with a perfect view of the student parking lot. He was sitting behind the wheel, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast October sky, watching. He's never picked me up from school before, I whispered. Not once in 4 years. Jake grabbed my arm gently. Maybe it's a coincidence? Maybe he got off shift early and wanted to surprise you? But I knew better. This wasn't about surprise pickups or quality father-daughter time. This was about this morning's route through Cedar Avenue. This was about Dad realizing that his surveillance system had detected unusual behavior, and now he was switching from passive monitoring to active investigation. I have to go over there, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. If I don't, he'll know I spotted him, and that'll make things even worse. I walked across the parking lot on unsteady legs, very aware that every step was being tracked by 7 different devices, plus his own direct visual surveillance. When I reached the truck, Dad rolled down his window with that forced smile he'd perfected over the past 3 years, the one that never quite reached his eyes. Hey, sweetheart. Thought I'd surprise you with a ride home. Dad, I have my car. I gestured toward my Honda. Remember? The one you bought me so I could drive myself to school? I know, but I missed spending time with you. We could grab ice cream, maybe talk about your day. His voice had that carefully casual tone that meant he was fishing for information. Anything interesting happen? Go anywhere new? There it was. He knew about this morning's detour, and he was trying to get me to confess without revealing his surveillance network. The gaslighting attempt made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to smile back. Just the usual boring Tuesday. School, homework, you know how it is. Dad's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You sure? Sometimes it's good to explore different parts of town. See how the other half lives. The casual way he said it made my blood run cold. He wasn't just tracking me anymore, he was toying with me. That's when I realized my psychological warfare plan had one major flaw. I wasn't the only one playing games. I think I'll just drive myself home today, I said, keeping my voice as normal as possible. But thanks for the offer. Dad's grip tightened on his steering wheel. Emma, I insist. Leave your car here, you can get it tomorrow. Dad, that doesn't make any sense. Then you'd have to drive me to school in the morning, and you work the early shift. I was backing away from his truck now, every instinct screaming at me to get distance between us. I'll see you at home, okay? Before he could respond, I turned and walked quickly back toward my car, feeling his eyes boring into my back. Jake was waiting by my Honda, looking pale. This is bad, he muttered as I unlocked the doors. Emma, he's not just suspicious anymore. He's escalating. As we pulled out of the student parking lot, I checked my rearview mirror. Dad's truck was following us, maintaining exactly 3 car lengths behind, close enough to keep visual contact, far enough to pretend it was coincidental. He's tailing me, I said, my hand starting to shake on the steering wheel. Jake, he's actually following me home like I'm some kind of criminal. Okay, stay calm. Just drive normally. Go straight home. But Dad's truck stayed behind us for the entire 15-minute drive to my house on Birchwood Lane. When I pulled into our driveway at 3:42 p.m., he parked on the street instead of pulling in next to me. He sat there for a full 2 minutes, just watching, before finally getting out. See you tomorrow, Jake, I said loudly enough for Dad to hear, trying to project normalcy. The moment Jake's car disappeared around the corner, Dad approached me with that same fake smile. So, he said, leaning against my car in a way that seemed casual but effectively blocked my path to the front door, want to tell me about your scenic route to school this morning? My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment where I either confessed to knowing about the trackers, or doubled down on the lie. I don't know what you mean. Dad pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times. Cedar Avenue. Sal's pawn shop. You sat in their parking lot for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Then you drove next door to that strip club and waited another 3 minutes and 7 seconds. He looked up at me with cold eyes. Want to explain what my 17-year-old honor student was doing in those places at 7:30 in the morning? The precision of his timing made my stomach lurch. Not only was he tracking me, but he was obsessively analyzing the data, timing my stops down to the second. My mind went completely blank. I hadn't prepared for direct confrontation this soon. Because I can think of several explanations, Emma, and none of them are good. Dad's voice was getting louder now. Are you buying drugs? Meeting someone I don't know about? Getting involved with people who hang around pawn shops and strip clubs? Dad, no. I got lost, okay? I was trying a different route to school and made some wrong turns. Lost. He said the word like it tasted bitter. For 7 minutes and 19 seconds. In 2 specific parking lots. The fact that he had calculated the exact total time made something snap inside me. Why are you keeping track of every second of my driving? That's not normal, Dad. What's not normal is my daughter suddenly developing an interest in the worst neighborhood in town. Dad stepped closer, and I could see the paranoid intensity that had been building for months finally breaking through his controlled facade. After 3 years of being responsible, of following rules, of being trustworthy, suddenly you're sneaking around Cedar Avenue like some kind of delinquent. I'm not sneaking around. I'm 17 years old, I'm allowed to drive on public roads. Not to those places. Not without explanation. Dad's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Emma, I know you better than you know yourself. This behavior? This isn't you. Someone is influencing you. And I'm going to find out who. The way he said it made my blood freeze. This wasn't just about morning detours anymore. Dad was convinced there was some outside threat corrupting his perfect daughter, and I realized with growing horror that my plan to mess with him had backfired spectacularly. Instead of just making him worry, I triggered something much more dangerous, his absolute certainty that he needed to save me from myself. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Dad's words over and over. I know you better than you know yourself. The absolute certainty in his voice when he said it made my skin crawl. I must have finally fallen asleep around 2 a.m., because I was jolted awake at 6:47 by the sound of my bedroom door opening. Dad stood in the doorway, already dressed in his fire department uniform, holding a steaming mug of coffee. Morning, sweetheart. We need to talk before I leave for work. My stomach immediately nodded. Dad never came into my room anymore, not since I'd asked for privacy when I turned 16. The fact that he was here now, uninvited, felt like another boundary being crossed. Can't it wait until tonight? I mumbled, pulling my comforter up to my chin. No. He sat down on the edge of my bed without permission, the mattress dipping under his weight. I've been thinking about yesterday, and I owe you an apology. That got my attention. In 3 years of increasingly controlling behavior, Dad had never once apologized for anything. I came on too strong, he continued, his voice soft and reasonable. You're right, you're 17, and you should be able to drive wherever you want without your old man interrogating you like a suspect. Relief flooded through me so quickly I felt dizzy. Maybe my plan had actually worked. Maybe yesterday's confrontation had shocked him into realizing how paranoid he'd become. It's okay, Dad. I know you're just worried about me. I am worried. Every single day. He reached over and smoothed my hair back from my forehead, the gesture so tender and familiar that for a moment he felt like the father I remembered from before Mom died. But that's my problem to deal with, not yours. I should have been happy. This was what I'd wanted, for him to back off, to give me space, to stop treating me like a potential criminal. So why did something about his tone make me uneasy? The thing is, Dad continued, taking a sip of his coffee, I realized I'd been going about this all wrong. Instead of questioning where you go and who you're with, I should be making sure you feel comfortable talking to me about anything. Complete honesty, both ways. Both ways? Dad's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Emma, I haven't been entirely truthful with you about something, and it's time I came clean. My heart started pounding. He was going to confess about the trackers. This was it, the moment where everything exploded into the open. After your mother died, I got scared. Really scared. The idea of losing you too. He paused, staring down at his coffee mug. So I took some precautions that maybe I should have discussed with you first. What kind of precautions? I tried to keep my voice neutral, but it came out as barely a whisper. I had a GPS tracker installed in your car. Just one, he said quickly. Nothing invasive, nothing that affects your privacy inside the vehicle. Just basic location monitoring so I know you're safe. I stared at him, processing what he just said. He was confessing to one tracker. 1. Not 7. Not audio surveillance. Just basic GPS monitoring that any worried parent might consider reasonable. He was lying to me while pretending to come clean. I know I should have told you before, Dad continued. But I was afraid you'd see it as me not trusting you, when really it's about not trusting the world around you. There are dangerous people out there, Emma. Dangerous situations. And if something happened to you, if I lost you like I lost your mother. His voice broke slightly, and I saw genuine tears forming in his eyes. For a moment, I almost felt guilty for being angry with him. Almost. Then I remembered the audio device. The 6 other trackers. The obsessive timing of my every movement down to the second. So there's just the one tracker? I asked carefully. Just one. Basic GPS, nothing fancy. Dad leaned over and kissed my forehead. I'm sorry, I didn't trust you enough to be honest from the beginning. Can you forgive me? Of course, Dad. But as he left my room and I heard his truck pull out of the driveway at exactly 7:23 a.m., I realized the game had changed completely. Dad wasn't just monitoring me anymore, he was actively manipulating me. The partial confession was designed to make me think I'd discovered his secret, while keeping the true extent of his surveillance hidden. I grabbed my phone and texted Jake, emergency. Meet me at school early. Park in the back lot. 7:45. His response came immediately, what's wrong? I stared at my phone screen, trying to figure out how to explain that my father had just lied to my face while pretending to apologize, and that I was now certain things were about to get much, much worse. He knows we know something, I typed back. And he's setting a trap. When I got to school at 7:43 a.m., Jake was already waiting in the back parking lot, pacing next to his beat-up Jeep Cherokee. The moment he saw my car, he jogged over and slid into my passenger seat. Okay, what happened? You sounded panicked. I told him about Dad's morning visit, his fake confession about one tracker, and the way he'd looked me straight in the eyes while lying through his teeth. Jake's expression grew darker with every detail. He's testing you, Jake said when I finished. Think about it, if you really didn't know about any surveillance, you'd probably be upset about even one tracker, right? You'd demand he remove it, or at least argue about your privacy. But if I knew about all 7, then you'd be relieved he only admitted to one. You'd act grateful for his honesty and let it slide. Jake ran his hands through his hair. Emma, this is actually brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. He's watching your reaction to gauge how much you've discovered. The realization hit me like ice water. So if I push back too hard about the GPS tracker, he'll know I found the others. But if I don't push back at all, he'll know you're hiding something bigger. Jake pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. We need to figure out exactly how you're supposed to react. What would a normal teenager do if their dad confessed to basic GPS tracking? I thought about my friend Zoe, whose parents had installed Life 360 on her phone last year. She'd probably be annoyed but understanding. Like, Dad, I get that you're worried, but this makes me feel like you don't trust me, kind of thing. Perfect. Measured annoyance with eventual acceptance. Jake finished typing and showed me his screen, he'd been taking notes. But Emma, we have a bigger problem. If he's testing your reactions, that means he's planning his next move based on what he thinks you know. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Hope you have a great day at school, sweetheart. Love you. By the way, talk to Principal Martinez about setting up a meeting to discuss your college application timeline. He's expecting my call this afternoon. I showed Jake the message, and his face went pale. He's never contacted your school directly before, has he? Never. He always goes through me for everything school-related. My hands were starting to shake. Jake, what if this isn't about college applications? What if he's planning to ask Principal Martinez about my behavior, my grades, whether teachers have noticed any changes? Or who you've been spending time with? Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. Emma, if he talks to the wrong teacher, someone might mention that you called in sick yesterday when you weren't actually sick. The first period bell rang, but neither of us moved toward the building. This felt more urgent than AP chemistry. There's something else, I said, remembering Dad's exact words from this morning. Complete honesty, both ways. He said that like he was making some kind of deal. Like he expects me to start confessing things to him in exchange for his fake transparency about one tracker. Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the students streaming toward the main entrance. What if we're thinking about this wrong? What if instead of reacting to his moves, we stay one step ahead? What do you mean? I mean, what if we figure out his endgame before he gets there? Jake turned to face me fully. Your dad isn't just some worried parent anymore, Emma. He's operating like someone with a military or emergency response background, which makes sense, given his job. He's treating this like a mission with objectives and contingency plans. The way Jake said it made everything click into place. Dad wasn't just being overprotective, he was systematically gathering intelligence, testing my responses, and coordinating with outside resources like my school. This wasn't paranoid parenting anymore. This was a calculated campaign to maintain complete control over my life, disguised as concern for my safety. And I had just walked directly into phase 2. That afternoon at 2:47 p.m., I was sitting in AP European history when my phone vibrated with a call from the main office. Ms. Chen paused her lecture about the French Revolution to give me permission to step into the hallway. Emma Rodriguez? This is Mrs. Patterson from the front office. Your father called and asked us to have you stay after school today. He'll be picking you up at 4:15 instead of you driving yourself home. My blood turned to ice. Did he say why? Just that there's been a change of plans and he needs to discuss some college paperwork with you. Should I tell him you got the message? Yes, I managed to croak out. Tell him I got it. I hung up and immediately texted Jake. Dad called school. Picking me up at 4:15. This is not about college paperwork. His response was instant. Where are you right now? Hallway outside Chen's room. Stay there. I'm coming to find you. 3 minutes later, Jake appeared around the corner, moving fast. Emma, we have a problem. I just talked to my friend Marcus, the one who works in IT security. I described those trackers we found, and he said something that made my stomach drop. What? Jake glanced around to make sure we were alone, then lowered his voice. The model numbers I gave him? Those aren't just professional-grade tracking devices. They're law enforcement grade. The kind that police departments and federal agencies use for surveillance operations. The hallway started spinning around me. Law enforcement? Marcus said the audio recording device alone costs $800, and it's restricted sale, meaning you need special credentials to purchase it legally. Jake grabbed my arm to steady me. Emma, your dad didn't just buy this stuff online. He either has connections in law enforcement that go way beyond the fire department, or what? Or he acquired it through channels that might not be entirely legal. I leaned against the lockers, trying to process what this meant. Dad was a firefighter, not a cop. How did he get access to police-grade surveillance equipment? And more importantly, what else was he capable of if he was willing to cross that line? There's more, Jake continued. Marcus said these devices can do remote monitoring, meaning your dad doesn't just see where you've been, he can track your location in real time, from anywhere. If he's watching right now, he knows exactly where we're standing. I pulled out my phone and stared at it, wondering if Dad was at the fire station right now, watching a little dot that represented me standing in the east hallway of Riverside High, talking to my boyfriend about his illegal surveillance operation. Jake, what if the college meeting story is just an excuse? What if he's planning to confront me about yesterday, but somewhere private where no one can hear me if things go badly? Don't think like that. Your dad loves you, even if he's being completely psychotic about it. But Jake's voice didn't sound convinced. Look, here's what we're going to do. When he picks you up, I'm going to follow at a distance. If he takes you anywhere other than straight home, I'm calling my parents. And tell them what? That my dad is tracking me with devices he shouldn't legally own? Before Jake could answer, my phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen, and my hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Hi, Dad. Hey, sweetheart. Just wanted to confirm that you got my message about pickup today. 4:15 sharp, main entrance. Yeah, Mrs. Patterson called me. I tried to keep my voice steady. Is everything okay? She mentioned college paperwork. There was a pause that lasted exactly 3 seconds too long. Everything's fine. Just want to spend some time with my girl. We haven't had a good father-daughter talk in a while. The way he said talk made my skin crawl. Okay, I'll see you at 4:15. Emma? I love you. You know that, right? I love you too, Dad. But as I hung up, I realized that for the first time in my life, those words felt more like a threat than a comfort. At exactly 4:15 p.m., I watched Dad's silver F-150 pull up to the main entrance through the glass doors of the lobby. My stomach was churning so violently I thought I might throw up right there on the polished linoleum floor. Jake squeezed my hand one last time before I walked outside. Remember, he whispered, I'll be 3 cars behind. If anything feels wrong, text me the word help and nothing else. Dad was smiling when I climbed into the passenger seat, but it was that same controlled smile from yesterday, the one that never quite convinced me everything was okay. How was your day, sweetheart? Fine. Normal. I buckled my seatbelt with hands that I hoped weren't visibly shaking. AP Chem test went well, I think. That's great. Dad pulled away from the school, but instead of turning right toward Birchwood Lane, he went left, toward the downtown area. Mind if we make a quick stop before we head home? I want to show you something. My phone was already in my hand. Show me what? Just something I've been working on. A surprise. The casual way he said it made alarm bells go off in my head. Dad didn't do surprises anymore. Everything in his world was planned, controlled, monitored down to the minute. I glanced in the side mirror and spotted Jake's Jeep 3 vehicles back, just like he promised. We drove through downtown Riverside in complete silence, past the courthouse and the library, until Dad turned into the parking lot of Riverside Storage Solutions, a sprawling complex of beige metal buildings surrounded by chain link fencing. Dad, what are we doing here? I rented a storage unit a few months ago, he said, pulling up to Building C and parking in front of unit number 47. Somewhere to keep some of your mom's things that I wasn't ready to deal with yet. The mention of Mom hit me like a physical blow. Dad knew exactly which emotional buttons to push, and he was using my grief as a weapon to keep me compliant. He pulled out a set of keys and unlocked the rolling metal door of the storage unit. Inside, instead of Mom's belongings, I saw something that made my blood freeze in my veins. The entire back wall was covered with printed photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of me walking into school, sitting in my car, talking to Jake in various parking lots, entering and leaving stores around town. Some were clearly taken with a telephoto lens from hundreds of yards away. Others looked like they'd been captured from security cameras. But it was the timeline that made me realize the true scope of what I was looking at. These photos went back months, maybe even a full year. There were pictures of me from last winter, wearing my red North Face jacket that I'd donated to Goodwill back in March. Jesus Christ, Dad, I breathed, stepping backward toward the entrance of the unit. Language, Emma. Dad moved to block my exit, his voice still unnaturally calm. I know this looks bad, but I need you to understand something. Everything I've done has been to protect you. In the center of the storage unit was a folding table with 3 laptops open on it, their screens showing what looked like tracking software with multiple GPS dots moving around a map of our town. One of the dots was stationary in the storage facility parking lot. That had to be my car. How long? I whispered. How long have you been watching me like this? Since the day after your 16th birthday. Dad sat down in a camping chair positioned in front of the laptops, like this was his command center. The night you asked for more independence, remember? You said you were ready for more responsibility, more freedom. So I made sure I could keep you safe while giving you what you wanted. This isn't keeping me safe, Dad. This is stalking. This is insane. Dad's expression hardened. What's insane is 17-year-old girls thinking they can navigate this world without guidance. What's insane is my daughter suddenly taking mysterious detours through the worst parts of town for no explainable reason. He stood up and walked over to the wall of photographs, stopping in front of a cluster of images that made my heart stop. They were all from yesterday, pictures of me and Jake searching my car in his driveway, examining the trackers, taking them apart. What's really insane, Emma, is that you thought you could outsmart me. The photos of Jake and me examining the trackers were crystal clear. Dad had been watching us from somewhere nearby, probably with binoculars or a telephoto lens, documenting our every move while we thought we were being clever. You took pictures of us, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You followed me to Jake's house and photographed us like we were criminals. I documented concerning behavior from my minor daughter, Dad corrected, his tone shifting into something colder and more clinical. Behavior that suggested outside influence and potential involvement in activities that could compromise her safety. He pulled one of the photos down from the wall, a close-up shot of Jake holding the audio recording device. The image was so clear I could see the serial number on the side of the tracker. This young man, Dad continued, tapping Jake's face in the photograph, has been systematically turning you against your family. Teaching you to deceive me, to sneak around, to disrespect the boundaries that keep you safe. Jake isn't turning me against anyone. He's trying to help me deal with having a father who's completely lost his mind. The words were out before I could stop them, and I immediately regretted the flash of honesty. Dad's jaw tightened, and he set the photo down on the table next to the laptops with deliberate precision. Help you deal with me, he repeated slowly. Is that what you call it when he encouraged you to tamper with safety equipment installed in your vehicle? When he helped you plan yesterday's little performance driving through drug dealer territory? My stomach dropped. He knew about the plan. Somehow, he'd figured out that yesterday's detour wasn't random rebellion, it was calculated psychological warfare. How could you possibly know that? Dad smiled, but there was no warmth in it whatsoever. Emma, sweetheart, I've been listening to every conversation you've had in that car for 8 months. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when you suddenly started discussing elaborate schemes to mess with me? 8 months. The audio surveillance had been running for 8 months, which meant he'd heard everything. Every private moment I thought I'd had, every vulnerable conversation with Jake, every time I vented about feeling suffocated and controlled. The Planned Parenthood idea was particularly creative, Dad continued, walking over to flip through a manila folder on the table. Though I have to admit, the support group angle would have been more effective. New Beginnings actually is a recovery program for teenage addicts. I might have actually panicked if you'd followed through with that one. The casual way he discussed my psychological warfare plan like it was some kind of academic exercise made me feel sick. This wasn't my father anymore, this was a stranger wearing his face, someone who'd been studying me like a lab rat for months. Dad, please, I tried, desperate to find some trace of the man who used to read me bedtime stories and help me with science fair projects. This has gone too far. I'm not in danger, I'm not on drugs, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just trying to be a normal teenager. Normal teenagers don't conspire with their boyfriends to psychologically manipulate their parents, Dad replied, pulling out a thick stack of printed transcripts. These are word-for-word records of every conversation you've had with Jake Richardson in your vehicle since February 15th. Would you like me to read some of the highlights? Perhaps the discussion from March 8th where you said you couldn't wait to leave for college and never come back. The transcripts were real. Pages and pages of my private conversations, printed out and organized by date. My most vulnerable moments, my fears, my frustrations, my dreams, all cataloged like evidence in a criminal case. That's when I realized with absolute certainty that this wasn't going to end with a conversation and a drive home. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking, what exactly do you want from me? He closed the folder of transcripts and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not anger, not disappointment, but something that felt almost like pity. I want my daughter back. The real Emma, not this defiant stranger that Jake Richardson has created. Dad gestured toward the wall of photographs. Look at this timeline, sweetheart. February 10th, first photo of you and Jake holding hands in a school parking lot. February 15th, first recorded conversation where you complain about my rules. March 3rd, first time you deliberately lied about where you were going. He was connecting dots that didn't exist, building a narrative where every change in my behavior over the past 8 months could be blamed on Jake's influence rather than his own escalating control. That's not how any of this happened, and you know it, I said. I started pulling away because you were suffocating me. Jake didn't cause anything, he just helped me realize that other families don't live like this. Other families don't face the risks we face, Dad replied, walking over to the third laptop and opening what looked like a detailed file system. Other families haven't lost someone the way we lost your mother. He clicked on a folder labeled current threats and my blood ran cold. Inside were dozens of subfolders with names I recognized, not just Jake, but Zoe, my lab partner Marcus, even Mrs. Chen from AP European History. You have files on my teachers? I have information on every person who has regular contact with you. Dad opened Jake's folder, revealing what had to be 30 pages of documents. Jake Richardson, 17, lives at 847 Maple Street with parents David and Jennifer Richardson. Father works as an accountant at Morrison & Associates, mother is a part-time dental hygienist. Older brother Marcus, 19, attends community college and works at Dataflow Solutions. The level of detail was terrifying. Not just basic information, but what looked like financial records, employment histories, even social media screenshots. Dad, this is stalking. This is harassment. If anyone else was doing this, anyone else isn't responsible for protecting you. Dad's voice was getting louder now, the controlled facade finally cracking. Anyone else didn't hold their wife's hand while she died in a hospital bed, promising to keep their daughter safe from every danger in this world. There it was, the emotional manipulation he always fell back on when I pushed too hard against his control. The sacred memory of Mom's death, weaponized to justify any behavior, no matter how extreme. Mom wouldn't want this, I said quietly. She wouldn't want you to destroy my life in the name of protecting it. Dad's hand slammed down on the table so hard that all 3 laptops jumped. Don't you dare tell me what your mother would have wanted. Everything I do is for her, and for you. The sudden explosion of rage sent me stumbling backward toward the entrance of the storage unit, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the moment I'd been dreading, the moment Dad's carefully maintained control finally snapped completely. "You're not leaving," he said, his voice dropping back to that unnaturally calm tone. "Not until we resolve this situation. Not until you understand what's at stake here." That's when I noticed he was standing between me and the only exit, and I realized that my phone had been silent for the past 10 minutes. No texts from Jake, no calls, nothing. "Where's Jake?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Dad smiled again, and this time it looked genuinely pleased. "He's being handled." The words, "he's being handled," hit me like a physical blow. My knees went weak, and I had to grab onto the metal doorframe of the storage unit to stay upright. "What do you mean handled?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. Dad walked over to the first laptop and turned the screen toward me. It showed a live GPS map with several moving dots, but now I could see labels on each one. One dot labeled MSCAR was stationary at the storage facility. Another dot labeled Jake's Jeep was also stationary, but at a location I didn't recognize, somewhere on Industrial Boulevard, about 2 miles away. "Your boyfriend has been following you, just like I predicted he would," Dad said with satisfaction. "Unfortunately for him, I've been tracking his vehicle for the past 3 weeks. Amazing what you can accomplish with a magnetic GPS tracker and 5 minutes alone in a parking lot." My stomach lurched. "You put a tracker on Jake's car too?" "Basic precaution. When someone is influencing my daughter's behavior, I need to understand their patterns, their habits, their vulnerabilities." Dad zoomed in on Jake's location, and I could see he was parked behind what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Right now, Jake is having a conversation with my friend Detective Morrison from the Riverside PD. Detective Morrison. I knew that name, Dad had mentioned him before. They'd worked together on some emergency response situations, barbecued together last summer. This wasn't just surveillance anymore, Dad was coordinating with law enforcement. "What kind of conversation?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "The kind where Detective Morrison explains to a teenage boy that tampering with legally installed vehicle safety equipment is considered vandalism under Michigan state law. The kind where Jake learns that encouraging a minor to deceive her legal guardian can be prosecuted as contributing to the delinquency of a minor." The blood drained from my face. "Dad, those charges are ridiculous." "No prosecutor would." "Wouldn't they?" Dad pulled out his phone and showed me a text conversation with someone labeled Morrison. The messages made my heart sink. "Morrison, kid's pretty shaken up. Admitted to removing tracking devices from your daughter's vehicle. Also confirmed the plan to make fake stops at concerning locations. Dad, any resistance?" "Morrison, none. Keeps asking if Emma's in trouble. Kid's genuinely worried about her." "Dad, good. Keep him there until I'm finished here. Then send him home with a warning about staying away from Emma." I stared at the messages, realizing that Jake wasn't just being questioned, he was being used as leverage against me. Dad knew that my biggest fear wasn't what would happen to me, but what would happen to Jake because of my rebellion. "This is kidnapping," I said, my voice getting stronger with anger. "You can't just have your police friends detain innocent people. Detective Morrison isn't detaining anyone. He's having a voluntary conversation with a young man who was found parked suspiciously behind an industrial building, apparently conducting surveillance." Dad's smile was triumphant. "Jake could leave anytime he wants. But he won't, because he thinks staying and cooperating will somehow protect you." The manipulation was so layered, so calculated, that I felt dizzy trying to follow all the angles. Dad had orchestrated this entire afternoon, the fake college meeting, bringing me to the storage unit, positioning Jake exactly where he wanted him. Even our rebellion had been anticipated and incorporated into his plan. "What do you want?" I asked again, but this time I already knew the answer would be terrible. Dad walked over to a corner of the storage unit I hadn't noticed before, where a small suitcase sat next to a pile of what looked like school withdrawal forms. "I want you to choose, Emma. Your old life with all its dangerous influences, or a fresh start somewhere safe where I can properly protect you until you're ready to make better decisions." He opened the suitcase, revealing neatly folded clothes, my clothes, packed like we were going on a trip I'd never agreed to take. "We leave for Montana tonight." The word Montana hit me like a slap across the face. I stared at the packed suitcase, at the withdrawal forms with Riverside High School letterhead, at my father standing there like he'd just announced a family vacation instead of kidnapping his own daughter. "Montana?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I have a job lined up at the fire department in Kalispell. Small town, good people, no outside influences." Dad pulled out one of the withdrawal forms and I could see it was already partially filled out in his handwriting. "My friend Captain Williams has been trying to recruit me for 2 years. Says they need experienced firefighters, and the community is perfect for raising teenagers. You can't just move me across the country because you don't like my boyfriend." "I can and I will." Dad's voice was matter of fact, like we were discussing what to have for dinner. "You're 17, Emma. I'm your legal guardian. I have every right to relocate our family for better opportunities." I looked around the storage unit with fresh eyes, finally understanding what I was really seeing. This wasn't just a surveillance command center, it was a planned operation. The laptops, the files, the photographs, even the camping chair positioned for long-term use. Dad had been preparing for this moment for months. "How long?" I whispered. "How long have you been planning to kidnap me?" "Since March 15th, Dad replied, consulting what looked like a timeline taped to the wall. "The night you missed curfew by 43 minutes and lied about why." That's when I realized the situation had progressed beyond normal teenage testing boundaries. March 15th. I remembered that night, Jake and I had lost track of time at the diner, talking about colleges and dreams and what life might look like after graduation. I'd been 20 minutes late, not 43, but apparently Dad's surveillance network had tracked every minute. "You've been planning to rip me away from everything I care about for 6 months, and you think that's normal parenting?" "I think it's necessary parenting." Dad walked over to the laptop showing Jake's location and frowned. "Detective Morrison says Jake is asking some uncomfortable questions about whether this conversation is actually voluntary. We need to wrap this up." The casual way he monitored Jake's situation while discussing my kidnapping made me realize something terrifying. Dad wasn't just having a paranoid breakdown. He was thinking clearly, planning strategically, coordinating multiple moving pieces. This was premeditated. Dad, listen to me, I said, trying to find some trace of reason in his eyes. If you force me to move to Montana, I will run away the first chance I get. I will call the police, I will contact Mom's sister in California, I will do whatever it takes to get back to my real life. No, you won't. Dad opened the second laptop and showed me another screen, this one displaying bank account information. Because Jake Richardson is going to be charged with criminal mischief and contributing to the delinquency of a minor unless you cooperate fully with our relocation. There it was. The final trap. Dad had positioned Jake as a hostage to my compliance, knowing I'd sacrifice my own freedom to protect him from criminal charges. Those charges won't stick and you know it. They don't have to stick. They just have to be filed. Dad's smile was cold and calculating. Jake's college applications are due next month, aren't they? Stanford, Berkeley, MIT? Think those admissions committees will be impressed by pending criminal charges, even if they're eventually dismissed? My legs finally gave out completely. I slumped against the wall of the storage unit, staring at this stranger who looked like my father but spoke like a calculating predator. He'd found the one threat that would break me, destroying Jake's future to ensure my compliance. You win, I whispered, tears starting to blur my vision. But I will never forgive you for this. Never. Dad nodded like that was an acceptable outcome, then picked up his phone to text Detective Morrison. Dad was typing his text to Detective Morrison when something unexpected happened. All three laptops started beeping simultaneously. Warning messages flashed across the screens, and I could see the GPS dots that represented our car suddenly disappearing from the maps. What the hell? Dad muttered, frantically clicking between windows. That's when I heard the sound that made my heart leap with desperate hope, multiple car doors slamming in the parking lot outside, followed by voices I didn't recognize. Official-sounding voices with a cadence of law enforcement. Riverside County Sheriff's Department. We need to speak with Thomas Rodriguez. Dad's face went white. He stared at the laptops as more warning messages appeared, signal lost, connection terminated, device offline, like his entire surveillance network was crashing in real time. How? He whispered, then his eyes snapped to me with sudden fury. What did you do? I didn't do anything. But even as I said it, I was remembering something Jake had mentioned yesterday. His brother Marcus worked in IT security, and Marcus had friends who worked in cybersecurity, and those friends had very strong opinions about illegal surveillance equipment. The voices outside were getting closer. Mr. Rodriguez, we have a warrant to search storage unit 47. Dad grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back corner of the unit, behind the wall of photographs. Not a word, he hissed. Whatever happens, you keep your mouth shut. I'm still your father, and Jake's future is still in my hands. But the Jake threat felt less powerful now, because if the sheriff's department was here, that meant someone had figured out what Dad was doing. Someone with enough authority to get a search warrant at 5:23 p.m. on a Wednesday. Thomas Rodriguez. The voice was right outside the unit now. Step out with your hands visible. Dad looked around desperately, like he was calculating escape routes, but there was nowhere to go. The storage unit had one entrance, and it was blocked by what sounded like multiple officers. I'm coming out. Dad called, but his voice cracked on the last word. My daughter is with me, she's not involved in anything. He squeezed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. Remember what I said about Jake. Then he walked slowly toward the entrance of the storage unit, hands raised, leaving me standing alone next to months of evidence documenting his systematic stalking of my entire life. I heard voices outside, Dad identifying himself, officers asking him to step away from the building, someone reading legal language about search and seizure. Through the metal walls, I could make out at least 4 different people talking, maybe more. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 3 minutes, a female officer appeared in the entrance of the storage unit. She was tall, professional looking, with short gray hair and eyes that widened when she saw the wall of photographs. Emma Rodriguez? She asked gently. Yes, ma'am. I'm Detective Sarah Chen with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? No, I'm okay. But my boyfriend Jake, my dad said he was being held somewhere on Industrial Boulevard by Detective Morrison. Detective Chen spoke into her radio. Unit 7, we need immediate welfare check on Jake Richardson, last known location Industrial Boulevard. Possible unlawful detention. Then she looked back at me. Jake's fine, honey. He's actually the one who called us. My knees almost buckled with relief. He called you? About 40 minutes ago. Said he was being questioned by someone claiming to be Riverside PD, but something felt wrong. When our dispatch checked, we don't have any Detective Morrison currently on duty. Detective Chen stepped further into the storage unit, her expression growing more grim as she took in the surveillance equipment and photographs. Jake also mentioned some concerns about tracking devices and surveillance. Looks like he was right to be worried. Through the entrance, I could see Dad sitting in the back of a patrol car, his hands cuffed behind him. He was staring directly at the storage unit, and even from 30 feet away, I could see the rage in his eyes. What happens now? I asked. Detective Chen was photographing the wall of pictures with her phone, shaking her head at the scope of what she was documenting. Now we figure out exactly what your father has been doing, and make sure you're safe. The full scope of Dad's surveillance network unraveled over the next 3 hours like a nightmare coming to light. Detective Chen walked me through the storage unit, cataloging evidence while explaining what they discovered. Your boyfriend's brother Marcus contacted the FBI Cybercrime Division at 3:47 p.m. today, she said, photographing the laptops. Apparently Jake had given him detailed information about the tracking devices, including serial numbers. When Marcus ran those numbers through federal databases, he discovered they were reported stolen from a Detroit Police Department evidence locker 8 months ago. My stomach dropped. Stolen? $47,000 worth of surveillance equipment, taken during a break-in last February. The same week your father started his enhanced monitoring of your activities. Detective Chen opened one of Dad's file folders, revealing purchase receipts from electronics stores across 3 different counties. He was buying backup equipment legally while using stolen law enforcement gear for the primary surveillance. The timeline made horrible sense. February was when Dad's behavior had shifted from worried parent to full-scale stalker. I thought it was triggered by me dating Jake, but apparently it had been triggered by Dad's decision to cross into actual criminal activity. What about Detective Morrison? I asked. James Morrison retired from Riverside PD 6 months ago. He's been working private security, and apparently your father convinced him to help with what he called a family intervention. Morrison had no idea about the stolen equipment or the extent of the surveillance. Detective Chen's expression darkened. When our real officers contacted Morrison an hour ago, he immediately released Jake and drove straight to our station to give a statement. Through the storage unit entrance, I could see more patrol cars arriving, along with what looked like FBI vehicles. This had escalated far beyond a family dispute into a federal investigation. The kidnapping plan was real? I asked, gesturing toward my packed suitcase. Very real. We found a rental truck parked 2 blocks away, loaded with the rest of your belongings. Your father had already given notice at his job here, put your house up for sale, and secured employment in Montana under an assumed identity. Detective Chen showed me a folder labeled Relocation Logistics, containing fake ID documents, new social security cards, and employment records for someone named Thomas Mitchell. Emma, if you hadn't discovered those trackers when you did, you would have disappeared completely. New identities, new location, no way for anyone here to find you. The magnitude of what Dad had been planning hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just controlling behavior, it was a complete erasure of my identity, my relationships, my entire life. All justified in his mind as protection. Your father is being charged with possession of stolen federal property, stalking, unlawful surveillance, identity fraud, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping, Detective Chen continued. The FBI is also investigating how he accessed certain databases to compile those background files on your friends and teachers. By 8:15 p.m., I was sitting in my Aunt Lisa's living room in Grand Rapids, watching news coverage of Dad's arrest on her laptop. Mom's sister had driven 3 hours to pick me up after Detective Chen called her, and she'd spent the entire drive back alternating between fury at Dad and apologies for not recognizing how bad things had gotten. 17 tracking devices, the news anchor was saying. Found throughout the victim's vehicle, bedroom, backpack, and even her school locker. The father, a Riverside firefighter, had been conducting comprehensive surveillance of his teenage daughter for over 8 months using stolen police equipment. 17 devices. Even Jake and I had only found 7. The story ended with footage of Dad being led into federal court, still maintaining to reporters that everything he'd done was for my daughter's protection. But his eyes looked hollow now, confused, like he was finally beginning to understand that his version of protection had become indistinguishable from imprisonment. Jake texted me at 9:43 p.m., "Are you okay?" I keep thinking about what could have happened if Marcus hadn't figured out those serial numbers. I stared at my phone for a long time before responding, "I'm safe. Thank you for saving me." Because that's exactly what he'd done. By questioning Detective Morrison's authority, by having his brother investigate the tracking devices, by refusing to just accept Dad's version of reality, Jake had saved me from disappearing completely. 3 weeks later, I'm living permanently with Aunt Lisa and finishing my senior year at a new school. Dad is in federal custody awaiting trial, facing a potential sentence of 15 to 20 years. The house on Birchwood Lane sold last week, and I used my portion of the proceeds to hire a lawyer who specializes in helping teenagers attain legal emancipation. I still have nightmares about that storage unit sometimes, about the wall of photographs documenting every moment of my life I thought was private. But mostly, I feel something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine freedom. Yesterday, Jake drove down from Riverside to visit, and we spent the afternoon walking around downtown Grand Rapids without anyone tracking our location, recording our conversations, or photographing us from hidden positions. When I realized I hadn't checked the time or worried about surveillance for 3 straight hours, I actually started crying. "It's over," Jake said, squeezing my hand. "He can't hurt you anymore." And for the first time since Mom died, I actually believe that's true.